This is a reading from the Forgiveness Project. I'm going to talk about forgiveness today, and it was adapted from a TED Talk. It is a dialogue between Phyllis Rodriguez and Aicha El-Wafi. On 11th September 2001, Phyllis Rodriguez's son Greg was killed in the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York. The following year, Phyllis met Aicha El-Wafi, whose son, Zacarias Moussaoui, was later to be sentenced to life in prison without parole in connection with this atrocity. This is Phyllis's words. Returning from an early morning walk along the Bronx River, the porter in my building told me there had been a fire at the World Trade Center. I hurried upstairs and turned on both the TV and the answering machine. Later that evening, when there was still no word from Greg, I suspected the worst, but still I refused to believe it. In fact, I didn't take it in until the following evening when it was officially announced that he had perished along with 3,000 others. The day I met Aicha was the day that changed my life because it changed my direction emotionally. It was the beginning of my learning that someone like Aicha, who has suffered so much, could still be emotionally generous. It brought out the generosity in me, and I felt better for it. Since then, I've learned that one way to heal is to bridge the gap between ourselves and the other. When Greg was killed, I thought, I will never forgive the people who murdered my son. But I have come to see forgiveness as more than a word. It's a context, a process. I don't forgive the act, but trying to understand why someone has acted in the way they have is part of the process of forgiving. Forgiveness is being able to accept another person for being human and fallible. Zacarias is an admitted member of Al-Qaeda, but there's no evidence that he knew anything about the attacks on the World Trade Center. He pleaded guilty either because he felt it would get him more humane conditions of confinement or because he was in no fit state to make any rational decisions. When I watched Zacarias at the trial, my heart was broken because I could not look at him as a stranger. I saw him as the son of my friend, Aicha. Meeting Aicha gave me strength, and it took away my anger and bitterness. It has also helped me to forgive myself, because a mother always feels guilty when things don't go right for her children. And these are Aicha's words. On 13th September 2001, my daughter called me to tell me that Zacarias was on television. I couldn't recognize my son. The picture was horrible. I knelt down in front of the TV and yelled, "It's not true. It's not my son. It's not possible." They were suggesting that he was connected to the terrorist attacks. Friends said I wasn't to blame, but I said, how can I not feel responsible for something he may have been involved in? Then on 25th October, I received a letter from Zacarias saying, I am an Islamic extremist, but I had nothing to do with the attacks. There's never been a shred of evidence to suggest that he was involved with the terrorist atrocities in New York. However, when I thought of the people who had died and of their families, I knew my suffering was not the same as theirs, and I wanted to give my condolences and I wanted to apologize. While I knew my son was not directly responsible for the attacks, extremist thinking like his had created that climate of hate. I entered the room where all these family members were waiting, and my eyes landed on Phyllis. Something like a magnet drew me to her. I felt her heart beating as fast as mine. And then everyone introduced themselves, we showed pictures, we talked, and after that things were almost normal. Although, of course, nothing was normal. It was painful, and it was wonderful at the same time. Although I'm not responsible for the choices my son has made as an adult, I still feel guilty because I gave birth to him. I so wish that Zacarias hadn't got involved with Al-Qaeda, but he fell into the hands of crooks. In bin Laden, he was looking for a father figure because his own father was violent with him and then abandoned us. He was called a dirty Arab and made to feel like a stranger in his own country. I feel anger, love, and compassion for Zacharias. A part of me is dead, buried with my son, who will have to spend the rest of his life in jail for things he did not do. This is tough. I was listening to NPR the other day, a show called Hidden Brain with Shankar Vedantam. I don't know if you've heard. Well, this is a Unitarian Universalist church. Of course, you've listened to NPR, I'm sure. Anyway, Hidden Brain with Shankar Vedantam, and he was talking to a political scientist named Ndwila Dube, who worked in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone had a very, very bloody war. From 1991 to 2002, upwards of 50,000 people died there, and many more were raped, were abused, were hurt. And she was talking to two people in a village, because you see, the guerrilla warriors in Sierra Leone had a tactic. They wanted to destroy community connections. They wanted to separate neighbor from neighbor. They wanted to pit neighbor against neighbor in order to wreak havoc in the country. This was their goal. So they would go into communities and they would threaten one neighbor with death unless they hurt another neighbor. She met with two people, Sar and Nuima. They were neighbors. They grew up as friends. The guerrilla warriors, I won't use the word warriors, the guerrilla fighters told Nuima he must beat Sar, or else they would beat him. He didn't do it. So the guerrilla warriors told Nuima he must kill Sar's father, or they will kill him. And he did do it. I'm not judging. We have the privilege of sitting here and not being in this situation where we have to make an ethical decision of that magnitude. And we don't have to think about those things. Well, I'm a seminary student, so I guess it is my job to think about those things. And that's why I've come to talk to you today about what I was thinking. How, after that, after a friend you grew up with in the same community as you kills your father, how, when that war ends, do you come back into beloved community? How do you forgive something like that? How do you live next door to a neighbor who did something like that? And they don't have the ability to move to another town, nor do they want to. This is their home. How do you come back and forgive something like that? So I started to think about it. And first I thought, well, what is the definition of crime? Who is a criminal? Indeed. And I began to realize that the boundaries of that definition is very, very hazy, is very, very unclear. Nima was threatened with his own life. He had a family. He had kids. He knew he would die if he didn't kill Sar's father. So the definition of a crime is very, very nuanced and complicated. In this country, it seems very cut and dry. You steal something, you're a criminal. You steal something, that's a crime, right? Well, what if the person doing the stealing is a single mother, a woman of color, who was marginalized by society before she was even born, who's grown up in cycles and cycles of poverty, who has obstacles in front of her, so many before she can even see where we sit, before she can even see the starting line, and she needs to feed her child, so she steals formula. It's still theft, but is this really a crime? Or it's the CEO of a corporation who takes her tax money that she's paying because they've rigged the system, and they don't pay taxes anymore because they've rigged the system because they need to support this hierarchy in order to keep their power, in order to keep their money, in order to keep people, this inequity based on the color of someone's skin. They're stealing money and not paying any taxes, or taking money from their employees or whatever. That's theft too, but they're lauded. CEOs are great. They're great business people. They'll make great politicians. Some are great, don't get me wrong. But we shouldn't, but I'm just trying to convey that crime and that theft can be interpreted in many different ways. Is the person who's sent to jail because they're a black transgender man of color, who's one of the many black bodies stolen and sent into the prison industrial complex, who was only defending himself because his life was in danger, sent to jail and gone into solitary confinement numerous times, which is torture? Is he really the criminal for defending himself? Or is the administrator who's implementing that policy of solitary confinement and torturing these people, many of whom are actually innocent, is that the criminal? So anyway, I began thinking about crime. These are extreme examples, but I think we all have the ability to be good and we all have the ability to be bad. We are all fallible. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm humanizing the other person. That's the first step in forgiveness, thinking of the other person as a family member, as a fellow human, as myself. Someone who perpetrated that crime is actually thinking of them as me. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's the first principle of our Unitarian Universalist faith, is we believe in the dignity of every person. Every person. Not some people, but not terrorists. Not some people, but not criminals. Every person. Respect and dignity for every person. That's a very tough thing to do, especially when you've been hurt very much, when your body's been hurt, when your country's been hurt. But ultimately, we are all humans. And I started thinking, wait a minute, if I'm thinking of this person as myself, this terrorist, if I was born into a Taliban camp, and I was inculcated from a child and taught, hate Americans, hate Americans, hate Americans. And it was modeled for me, kill, 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 kill. You know what? I would grow up hating Americans and being okay with killing. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be punished. It doesn't mean there aren't consequences. But when you humanize that situation, let's give you another example. If I was born in a church that preaches prejudice against homosexuals, my whole life, hate gay people, hate gay people. That's what I was taught. That's what I was taught over and over. When I grew up, it's going to be very difficult for me not to be homophobic. So it's that understanding of the other person. It's the respect and dignity of human dignity of treating every person as yourself, as a fellow human. And I thought, well, wait a minute. This first principle is pretty good. What about the second principle? How does this apply to forgiveness? We believe in justice, equity, and compassion in all human relations. Okay, I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, justice instead of forgiveness. Justice in this country and the world, it seems to be, when the president gets up on an aircraft carrier with guns drawn like he's in the Old West after 9/11, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, revenge, retribution. That a lot of the times is justice. We want justice meted out. We want person killed. We want them to feel pain. It seems to be more in this country, justice is sating some animalistic need for someone else to be in pain when we're in pain. I don't think that's what was meant by justice in our principle. I believe justice in our principle is, as the theologian Paul Tillich does, equated with love. It's rehabilitative justice. It's creative justice. It's justice that turns a bad thing into a good thing by giving and by loving. I believe his words were, justice is preserves what love reunites. So you show that compassion, you show that empathy at first to your enemy, to someone who perpetrated a wrong, and the justice is acting on that by empathizing with that person. And once again, it doesn't mean that you don't protect future victims of an abuser. It doesn't mean that people don't have consequences. But those consequences and that reparative justice is now done through the lens of empathy, and so it can be done with compassion. And that's what compassion is. And the other part of the second principle, it's justice, equity, and compassion. If you have empathy for another person, if you put yourselves in their shoes, if you see the child growing up in that Taliban camp, if you see your partner, your wife, is in some pain and that's why they hurt your feelings, if you empathize and you act on that empathy, that's compassion. That's what compassion is. So the second principle works too. So we humanize the other person. We realize they are us and they are fallible. We empathize with them, and then we act on compassion. And that's how we can forgive. But what exactly is forgiving someone? A lot of times in this country we think, well, that's weakness. You're giving them a gift. Why? We have this moral indignation. They hurt me. Why should I forgive them? That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is, what I was saying, understanding that we also have the ability to be good and evil just as the other person. Treating the other person, and I believe the Buddhist monk Matthieu Ricard used to talk about this. Treat someone who committed a crime like a physician would treat a patient, or someone who has a mental illness. You treat them with caution, you treat them with care. You can't let that person, you have to, run amok and do whatever necessarily for their own safety and our safety. But you do not treat them with hatred. You do not treat them with anger. You treat them as you would treat yourself if you were in pain. That's what forgiving is recognizing that. And forgiving, because it's so difficult, is also, and this is the key, it's giving up on principle, giving up the right to revenge. I was talking before about taking revenge and eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We have that right. If someone hurts me, I have the right to take revenge. But on principle, I know that only engenders hate, and that doesn't engender long-term peace, and that solves nothing, and it's not punitive, and it's not preventative. So on principle, in order to live my Unitarian universal values, I give up that right for revenge. It is an act. It is a gift you are giving, not just to the person committing the crime, it is a gift you are giving to yourself. It is a gift you are giving to humanity, and that is justice. If we met out justice and punished someone, but yet humanity still hurts, yet you are still broken by being a victim of this crime, how is that justice? You haven't created justice if you're not healed yourself. So forgiving is self-empowering. It allows you to move on and not live your life dependent on the other person who committed that crime against you. It allows you to move on, even if they don't offer an apology. Now you're waiting for them to offer an apology before you move on from your hurt? Why are you giving them that power? You offer the forgiveness in order that you can take the power, and you're no longer broken by victimhood. You're no longer defined by that act that was committed against you. Forgiveness is powerful because it heals yourself along with the other, along with the world. And there's really no other option to move on in peace. You can have a violent action, a quote-unquote just war that has a stalemate and people are supposedly in peace, but they're really standing with guns pointed at each other. They're just not firing them. That could be a short-term peace. But without acting through empathy, acting compassionately through empathy, without forgiving, you won't engender long-term peace. Without having the courage to drop down those guns and look at the other person and welcome them as yourself in beloved community, you won't engender long-term peace. And it's hard. Be gentle on yourselves. It's not snapping your finger and say, oh, I just, forgive my spouse or my partner. She upset me so much. No, it's a process. When we get angry, our limbic systems light up. And it's like, I'm angry. I don't want to, It's very difficult to tamp that down. And you have to then confront the hurt again. You have to think about what hurt you in the first place. That's hard. But honestly, if you do that, you won't have to think about it again. It may still cause you pain, but you can move on from that and be in control of it rather than it controlling you. So be gentle with yourselves. Forgiveness isn't easy. And to that end, and there's one more reason to do it, scientifically. They have some studies that say forgiveness equals better health. You lose that anxiety. We know, losing anxiety, losing stress, your blood pressure comes down, your cholesterol comes down. Forgiveness leads to less anxiety. So for no other reason, we need to forgive just to make ourselves healthier. So forgiveness, essentially, the philosopher David White put it succinctly. He said, forgiveness puts us on It doesn't let the pain of the past define our future path. We forgive. That pain doesn't define us anymore. We now define our path. It may still resonate, the pain. I'm not saying it goes away, but now we're in control of it. So I thought about all of these things about forgiveness, and when I thought about Sierra Leone and what would happen if I was in that situation, and I want to tell you what they actually did. They had to come back into community. They had to forgive each other. No choice. So what Windibly Dubie is her name, I'm mispronouncing it, I apologize, was studying was this community tradition, a ritual that they started, where they created a covenant of sorts. They came into community in a circle, and the people who committed the crimes fully confessed and asked for apologies. And the covenant was this: no one could be convicted, no one could be prosecuted, no one could be punished, no matter how heinous the crime. Murder, rape, you confess, you cannot be punished in this tradition, in this ritual they created. And there's no physical fights. You have, even if you don't accept the apology, you have to stand there and you cannot have a physical altercation. And then the other person would offer forgiveness. And that's what Numa Ansar did. And she studied this community months after compared to other communities. And after that ritual, they became much more forgiving in all the little things too. They became from 9 to 31 months, I think she was there, and the ability to forgive just grew and grew. And you know what happened? Social ties started to form that weren't there before. People got together to build clinics, to build schools. Community, it came back together in beloved community. It doesn't mean there wasn't still pain, but they were able to come back together and see each other as humans who were hurt by this war as much as the other person. And that's what that radical forgiveness did. So what are you saying, Josh? Are you saying we go out and forgive murderers and things? We have to work on it slowly. We have to build that muscle. They had to do that radical forgiveness because of the situation they were in. So what I'm going to ask myself to do, and hopefully you'll do it as well, is start to build the muscle by, when you're in an argument, and I know we all get in arguments with our spouse or a partner or a family member, sibling, parent, whatever it is, I would like you to, just once maybe, every other argument, you don't have to do it every one, just stop it. We're going to stop it right now. Now don't worry, we're going to get back to arguing. I'm still going to win, don't worry about it. I'm just going to stop it right now because Josh wanted me to try this. And I'm going to put myself in your place for just a second. It's going to be tough, but I'm going to think about you empathetically. I'm going to have compassion for what you're feeling without thinking about what I'm feeling, and I'm going to forgive you. You don't need to ask for that forgiveness. I'm just going to do it. But don't worry, after that I'm going to get back and we're still going to fight and I'm still going to win. I'd like you to try that, because what will happen is, I hope, you may go back to that argument. You may still be hurt. But now that you're arguing through the lens of empathy, you're doing it compassionately, I think that argument will take a different direction. I think you'll be able to solve it easier. You may not even want to go back to arguing at all. Who knows? I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, so yes, I would like you to try that once. I'm certainly going to try it. Because hatred and anger, just like the darkness and the coldness can't exist with the light and the heat when you switch the light on, hatred and anger can't exist with empathy and compassion. You'll find that when you're empathetic and compassionate, the hatred and anger dies down. It pushes it out of the way. They can't exist together. So, in the same way you switch on that light, in an argument, just switch on that empathy and compassion, see how it works. If it doesn't work, keep arguing. But I think that maybe it will. I appreciate being here again. Thank you very much.